All right, so we're doing an iPad Air 5th gen. This is pretty similar to the 4th gen. This is the 4G model, not that that matters too much. I have my heat plate set to approximately 70 degrees Celsius. So we want to heat this up a bit, and then we're going to use a combination of two tools to remove the screen, which is very pivotal if you want to reuse the screen, which I assume most of you do. But the general approach is we use this to separate and then pull the adhesive out. And there's a link for one of these tools. You can just check out eTech Parts. I'm going to supplement with some heat. So I should have started with this, but first of all, the screen opens to the right, and there are 3 strips of adhesive, one along the top, 2 symmetrical that start in these corners and terminate at the charging port. So the technique I have is basically to use this tool to sort of remove the adhesive, as opposed to using metal tools. I just find that you're able to disperse the pressure over a wider area. You're way less likely to crack the glass or damage the display. So I know I'm kind of cheating here because I'm not using a heat mat, and I'm also not using a hairdryer or anything else. But if you do have either one of those, this might take you a little bit longer. I know I've seen in other videos, if you do have a heat mat, one of the things you can do is just lay the iPad on the heat mat and do the entire process that way. And you could periodically, as long as you have the suction cup tool, separate that. This entire thing took me about 3 minutes, but as you can see, the technique I have is just slowly pulling out the adhesive, as you want to avoid using sort of any metal tools directly on the glass or LCD. So I'm not going to worry about the last bit of adhesive, which runs from about here to here, because we've already done the hard part, which is to get the screen off. So once you get your screws out, this plate comes off just like this. You just sort of nudge it aside. And I guess my display connector already came undone. Generally, you want to disconnect your battery before connecting or disconnecting anything. And honestly, it tends to matter more when you're reconnecting things than it does when you're disconnecting things.
So, first of all, if you've got this far and you think, hell no, I do mailings. Second, I also buy iPhones. Working, broken, whatever. Even if it looks like this, I'm still interested. Link in the description. Let's make a deal.
Now, I can already tell that my frame is bent this way, and then it's also bent this way, and ever so slightly this way. And somehow the top was left intact. But once I get my board out, I'm gonna straighten it. You're generally better off doing it in that order, if you're, you don't want to bend the frame when the board is still in it, just as a safety precaution. But we have, my God, quite a few different flexes and antennas. This is probably one of the more annoying parts. I'm going to mention really quickly as I start out, this one, there's a little sticker. And then you have that little thing, because you need to undo all of these. And if you didn't know, yeah, they sort of hide it there, which is pure Apple. So some of this stuff you got to use your tweezers for. And once again, you don't need to do this in any particular order. We have some, tape over 3. So these 3 flexes right here, which are a part of this, and this. And then all 3 of these have a little, let me see if I can zoom in, but they have this little flap. And then we might need to warm this up a little bit. Maybe. So there's that one. Definitely adding heat would probably make that go along easier, but I mean, I guess you could just pull it out like that. So there's the bottom. Now we can move on to these 4. Now we need to get this off of this flex. All right, next we have, the fun doesn't stop. Right here. And then our front camera. Another ZIF connector with some hidden tape, which I think is the microphone, because that goes up there. Yeah, that's the microphone. All right, I forgot to lift up that little flap. All right, then we have this little dude. And you need to peel this back. You sort of just need to wiggle your tweezers. So if you can see the underside right there, it's plastic, so you're not like putting it directly on metal. We then have this flex, 2 more of these. Sort of fold these out of the way. We then have, this is a part of the power button and Touch ID. And then we have one last little ZIF connector. Lift up in that little flap, and then this comes right out. All right, now, before I forget, we need to pull 2 screws from the charge port. And then the motherboard at this point is just held in with adhesive. So I'm gonna put this on the heat mat for a few minutes. Okay, so now that it is sufficiently warm, yeah, generally probably the easiest place to start is, well, let's go with a charge port. There we go. Now I go with the slow and steady approach, which is you just sort of inch it in and then just adding alcohol along the frame. It'll sort of do the work for you, and you don't have to forcefully bend or pry. All right, and I'm getting ahead of myself because I forgot to do that flex right there. You can take this, set it aside. And our port is right here. This whole thing. But now we're gonna go into the microscope. So I'm gonna sort of set this up, but yeah, I got my camera, so I'll show you what's gonna happen under the microscope. But I'm gonna use hot air to take it off. I usually use, I think it's like 360 on my quick. And then I have my soldering iron over here. Let's turn on. And then I have a somewhat, I don't know, small tip. And then I'm gonna use some low melt solder to remove the port. So I'm gonna use a combination of low melt solder and then my hot air station to remove the port. And then I'm gonna use the soldering iron for the rest. And then we're gonna need some flux. So I'm laying some flux down. I got my soldering iron. I'm taking some low melt. The reason we're mixing in low melt solder is the solder that's on here is a lot higher temperature, so it's just gonna help us remove this. My hot air. And then we're gonna sort of lift up, and you're gonna see me sort of rock back and forth. It's tricky. I would say this is still, even to this day, and I've done many of these. The tricky thing about this is removing this without pulling pads. Also, right along here, there's usually a strip of adhesive. And so at this point, there's just very gentle pressure from me lifting up, and then the port is sort of naturally coming undone. And I think there's just adhesive. Oh, there we go. So this pad looks a little funky, but I think it's fine. So I can take my weight off. I just needed that for when I pulled off my port. And I'm gonna mix in some regular 183 solder, 6337. The way my instructor sort of told me how to do this is it's almost like you're like painting it. So you don't want to spend too much time on any one particular area. But overall, these look good. And then you can see right here, this is that piece of adhesive. Okay, so a couple of things I'm going to mention. You want to make sure that all three of these ZIF connectors are, they're good, they're not damaged. The last thing you want to do is solder this on and then find out that one of these is messed up and you got to remove it. But here we have our port. You'll see, let's see, should be able to see these. I ended up tinning this area, which is fine. These are meant as just alignment pins. So this one's supposed to be gold, but I got some solder on it, it's fine. But you can see the pad I thought I pulled was fine, but this is what we're supposed to look like. So I laid down some flux. And then we're going to align, where do we have it? Right there. Right there. All right, so now that we have a little bit more solder, we can tack each one of these down. I'm gonna wipe off my flux. And then we're gonna apply a little piece of Captain tape just to make sure that it doesn't touch the housing. We don't want to short anything out. Now, here's my frame. So I'm gonna straighten out these just while it's out of the board. So now we have our board. I'm gonna keep this piece of adhesive on just for the time being, just in case I don't know, if there's more damage to the board, the last thing that I wanna do is have to fight with this on its way out. Now there is a sort of alignment pin right about here. Now for the sake of just testing, I am only going to, let's see, I'm going to connect the power button. Yeah, and then it's literally it. Screw down our battery, and then we're gonna give this a charge. All right, so I did this off of camera, but there's this plate and one screw, and yeah, also I did this off camera too, but make sure you don't forget about your 2 screws. All right, next we're gonna use some, so I'm gonna link a video up right here, which is sort of just best practices. This might be overkill for you, but before I lay down my Tessa 61395, I'm gonna lay down some primer on both the frame and then also the screen. It just helps whatever adhesive you put down, it helps it bond, just making it stronger. You can get it in this jar, or you can get these. So there's the frame. Now for my screen. You obviously want to be a little bit more cautious. If you're unsure, you could just skip this altogether. Next, we have our Tessa 61395. If I can find where this starts. All right, right here. Using the screen as a reference guide, you'll notice that there are magnets right here and right here. So there are certain sections we unfortunately have to kind of avoid. You'll notice there are certain areas. You can get strips that are pre-cut, but I find this to work pretty fine. Especially on this one, the glass and the display are glued together, so you're not going to get dust in between these two. You will notice that I avoided certain areas, basically right where the flex is, and then also up here, you want to avoid the ambient light sensor. Now we're ready. Before you connect your display, you want to disconnect your battery. We can pull our battery out, our battery isolator. So there is sort of a little hook right there. So this needs to come right about so. And then this one, you should notice that there's a lip on 3 sides. So you want the side without the lip to face this way, because you don't want to accidentally crimp or tear or sever this screen, because it's an expensive screen. So when I was testing it before, we had a Touch ID message. That's because I didn't bother connecting all, 20 something flexes. But obviously that message went away once I connected it. So obviously it helps to make sure that your touchscreen works. Generally, the touch panel on iPads there's a top section and a bottom section. So if you press 1 or 9, you're generally good. If you are a repair shop, these things come in handy because it gives you an idea of how much current is going into the iPad. So it says right here, we're charging, and it gives us a number. And sometimes, this will give you an indication of, especially if you have a damaged display. So if you see a number that's like 200 or something like that, you know that it's receiving the proper current. So these are just great tools to have. Obviously, as you can see, once the screen is on, it jumps up quite a bit. We're now ready to seal up the screen. So I'm gonna do the strips over there last. So you want to be real gentle because obviously the flexes are screwed down, and if you pull too hard, you could accidentally tear something. And the reason we do it this way is we want this side to be the last, because if you did it the other way around and you accidentally touched one of these, the screen touched one of them, it's just kind of annoying to deal with. So last but not least, I'm gonna put this on the heat mat for just a few minutes. You don't want it too hot, so 70 degrees. And from here, let it cool down. You can just stack some books on top of it. It just helps the adhesive cure to the frame.